All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a real alcoholic according to the diagnostic criteria of Dr. William Silkworth in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and Doctor's Opinion. I am an outright mental defective and full flight from reality who cannot, at the best of times, distinguish between true and false. And I know this because we were sitting outside talking about Fitz-Mayo's story in We Agnostics on page 45. And there's that line that says, his alcoholic problem was taken away that very night. Years ago, it disappeared. Poof. It doesn't say poof. I added the poof. But the rest of it is what it says. And I said, well, has your alcoholic problem been taken away? Neither is mine. And so I don't understand. I said, so I brought this up. Do you guys know every Christmas there's that Corona commercial that comes on television with the guy and the girl sitting on the beach with the bucket with 4 beers? First of all, there's only 4. Like, who the hell drinks 4 beers? 4 beers, and there's a palm tree with Christmas lights, right? And I see that shit every year. And the first thought that comes into my head every time I see that commercial is, those were the days. That's when it worked for me. One slight problem. I was never on the beach in the Caribbean with a palm tree with Christmas lights. So the reason that my alcoholic problem has not been taken away is simply because I have fond memories of shit that never happened. And that's pretty much it. So tonight is the 8th step, and it's my favorite step. Just so you know. Ask me why. Because it's awesome. It's an awesome step. Right? There's really not a lot written in the book. And if you look at page 76, if you have your book or you want to grab one, we'll make some reference to it and we'll talk about the 12 and 12 a little bit. But let's look at the step, right? What does the step say? Well, if we look on page 59, it says distinctly, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to all of them, right? Most people, when they talk about step 8, they conflate it with step 9. And it's not and it's quite understandable, because if you look on page 76, it says, now we need more action, which we find that faith without works is dead. So let's look at steps 8 and 9. Even in the book, they put them together. But there's a distinction between 8 and 9. 8 is figuring out who you need to fix what you've broken, and 9 is fixing what you've broken with the people you think you need to fix that you figured out in step 8 when you made a list of who you need to fix when you're thinking about what you need to fix when you broke it in the first place. Does that make sense? Made perfect sense to me. So we start off with a list. So what we have to remember is that this entire step, it goes on to say, right? It says, we have made a list of the persons we have harmed and who we're willing to make amends. And we made this list when we took inventory. So inherently, my harms list that's generated directly from my 4th column of my 4th step, combined with my 1st column of my 4th step, which is everybody I got beef with, is inherently my beginning of my amends list, right? It says, because what we're really talking about, in essence, is we're talking about a step that involves personal relations. And the reason it's my favorite step is because the thing that has always destroyed me in my life and really has led to my alcoholism, oddly enough, people always ask, well, why am I an alcoholic? And there's really not a lot of answers. I mean, you can talk about neurology, genetic predisposition. You can talk about community model, disease model. You can talk about agent of harm and environment versus genetic predisposition. You can talk about all that kind of groovy stuff. But what I learned in recovery is to stop asking why, because why is a circular argument, and it kept me drunk for years and years and years. Like, that was it. Why is the sky blue? Well, because the water's blue. And why is the water blue? Because, the sky's blue. Okay, let's get drunk. Like, that was it, right? That was the whole thing. Dude, blue. It's a great color. Let's have a drink. Like, what the hell? Like, it doesn't matter. Just circle and circle and circle. And, however, this is my favorite step because in the 12 and 12 in step 8, it actually answers the question, why I'm an alcoholic. It's amazing, right? And the only other time that we ask why, and we talked about this when we talked about the 5th step, is right? What is the exact nature of my wrongs? It's not what I did or who I did it to. It's why I did it, why I continue to do it, and why I still do it to a certain degree, even in recovery, to my own detriment. I'm having the vapors. Is it hot in here, or is it just me? All right. So let's read a little bit. Let me read this. It says, we subjected ourselves to drastic self-appraisal, and now we go out to our fellows to repair our damage. Right? He jumps right away to step 9, right? But we can't go out to repair that damage unless we know what and who the damage is laid upon. And we have to do that in a proactive way. And it has to be categorized, and I have to make a list, right? So we make a list of all these persons, right? All these persons. Because what we're looking at is this idea of 8 and 9 as a package. Remember, last week we talked about 7, and really what we have to talk about is the 7-step prayer, because we just got done with a prayerful idea, right? My Creator, I am now ready for you to have all of me, good and bad. That means take both my strengths and my foibles and utilize me. I just want to be a giant tool. I kind of am one, so it's appropriate. But I want to be your tool, right? And in order to do that, I have to clean my house, right? What does it say on page 164 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous? Obviously, we cannot transcend something we haven't got. And what don't I have? I don't have a clear channel to become a tool, as St. Francis would say, a channel of thy will, right? To help another alcoholic. I cannot give something or transmit something I haven't got. What I don't have is the ability to receive with grace because of my bad behavior. Every relationship I ever had in my entire life, I perceive as transactional. There's always a contractual agreement. There's always a marker, something for something. There's never unconditional love, and there never has been. And the reason is because in step 5, I realized how insecure and horrible my self-identity was. So I always had to pretend to be someone else. And in that pretense, it blocked me from any authentic relationships. And so I was always fronting and presenting something that wasn't true. And in doing that, I could never have an intimate relationship. And we know this, right? 4 is that key, right? 4 and 8 in the 12 and 12. These are the locks, right? I start to unpack it. In step 4, on page 53 in the 12 and 12, it says the primary fact, number 1 fact, that we fail to recognize is our total inability to have a true partnership with another human being. That's the number 1 fact for me. The number 1 fact I always thought was the fact that I like to shoot heroin and drink tequila. Apparently that's not the number 1 fact. The number 1 fact is that I have a total inability to have a true partnership with another human being. Because I am ashamed of who I thought I was. Which meant I had to get up the courage to build a new persona so I could stand up in front of you and go, don't you know who I think I am? That was the response. Overcompensation for a zero-sum fault. The fault had 0 weight, 0 net value. That means any compensation is an overcompensation. Those overcompensations backfired, caused me strain, and being a dumbass alcoholic, instead of dialing it back, I doubled down. Because that's what I always did. Right? So, remember, I said that 3 and 7 were linked last week because of the prayerfulness of them. There's no amen at the end of the 3rd step prayer. It's at the end of the 7th step prayer. I surrender my will, my actions in step 3. I look at you and go, just tell me what to do. I'll do it. I give up. It's easy. That part's easy. The hard part is surrendering my trust in the higher power, and the power is greater than me. That when I do what I'm told, things will work out the way they're supposed to work out. Which is why there's an amen at the end of the 7th step prayer. So I am now ready to be utilized. But in order to do that, I have to clear away the wreckage of my past. You cannot drive down a street where there's wreckage. You just can't. You know, there's a tragic fire going on right now in California, in Malibu, and Thousand Oaks, and that whole area where they just had the shooting. And there's people that died. in their cars trying to drive away, because I'm from LA, I know that area. Like, the PCH sucks getting to Malibu. It's like one lane in each direction, and when you got a ton of people trying to escape and there's fire on all sides. So what did they do? They used the bulldozer to clear the cars away so the emergency crews could get in and get out, right? They had to clear that. It's a tragic example, but that wreckage had to be cleared to effectively help the people that were still there. And that's really what we're talking about. I have to effectively clear my wreckage so that I can be of use to God. Because it goes on to say, what is the main point, right? That I need to have the will to generate this list. This list has to be accurate and thorough on page 76. If I don't have the will to do this, I ask until it comes. I remember that I agreed to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And it's italicized. When you see something italicized in the book, know that it's important. Because when they first printed the big book, beyond the fact that they sold shares for 25 cents, and you do know that both Abby and Bill received royalties on the printing of the big book until their death, which as well they should. But they bought secondhand paper, super thick, on a discount that wasn't used, and it was very expensive to put something in italics, because you have to change the entire typeset. So if they did it, and they shelled out those extra few shekels, it's important. Know that. So when you see something that's italicized, you should probably highlight it just on spec, right? So it goes on. He says on the top of 77, he tells us why we have to do this. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. This word is important. One little word, three letters, F-I-T. It doesn't tell me that my real purpose is to be of maximum service. My real purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service, which means I have to fit into the community, into humanity, into society, into this brotherhood, into the fellowship, into humanity, which I never fit in before. I was always on the outside. I remember even as a kid, I'd go to play at my friend Nate's house, right? And Nate and Leon and my boys, and I'd be playing, and I have to go home early for dinner because they all ate later than me. And the minute I walked out of that house, I'm like, I know they're playing with the Evel Knievel thing right now. They're just waiting for me to leave to do that. I know they're doing it. Just wait until that's who thinks like that? Alcoholics do. I thought like that when I was 6. Imagine the shit that was in my head by the time I was 14. Are you kidding me? People would not let me near their loved ones if they knew what was going on in my head. Seriously. My real purpose is to fit myself into humanity, to be an open channel, to be a tool for God so that I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows. And if it means that this step is about fitting myself into being maximum service, then it's all about relationships. It has to be. Because the truth is, I thought that I had power to destroy circumstances or influence situations. But the truth is, I don't. I never did. Situations and circumstances are bigger than me. They always have been. They always will be. The only thing that I could affect negatively is other people. In my zeal or fantasy of affecting a circumstance, I would lay waste to the people around me as what I believe to be my way to get to those circumstances and be effective. I would damage and hurt and harm people. So when the step says we made a list of all the persons we had harmed, I need to consider for myself, what does it mean to harm someone, right? Well, let's look on page 80 in the 12 and 12. Let me open it up real quick, because there's an awesome line. There's actually a couple awesome lines. My all-time favorite line in the entire 12 and 12 is on page 80. It's my favorite step, I told you, just like last week's was. And the one before that. Page 80, it says, Somewhere. Here it is. It says, to define the word harm in a practical way, we might call it the result of instincts in collision. My broken-ass instincts with normal people's instincts. My instincts were to always make myself better so that someone would just love me for 2 seconds more. Right? Or talk to me. Or give me the slightest bit of attention. But in order to do that, I didn't think I was good enough, so I had to make up somebody that was. So in doing that, I was in collision with everyone. It says in the 4th step, we are constantly in collision. What's it say on page 63? We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, right? We are in constant collision. Self will run riot. That's what I was, right? So which causes, these collisions will cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to other people. When I try to control a circumstance, when I try to change the situation, when I try to exert power, which is limited, who gets hurt? Not the circumstance, not the situation, but the people around me that I utilize as my pawns to get what I want. Every single time. And what I want is just to be loved. But what I do actually has the contrary result. Right? Because I lack the capacity for authenticity. I just do. Right? So what is a harm? Well, it's anything like that is really a harm. So I remember when I was looking at this, and I was talking to my sponsor when I first got sober, and he's like, "Yeah, it's going to be a pretty big list." And I'm like, "Well, I really haven't harmed that many people. I mean, or who has said this 1,000 times? I'm only hurting myself, dude. Mind your own business. It's not like I'm doing anything to you." Really? I stole all your money, I crashed your car, I lied, I cheated on you, and then I slept with your best friend at the same time. No, I didn't hurt anybody. It's just a phase. 30-year phase. It's just a phase. So we got to figure out what's hard. Emotional damage, physical damage, mental damage, spiritual damage, right? And then I got to say, okay, well, if that's true, my sponsor made it easy for me because I'm going to make this super easy for you. Instead of writing a list of all the people you've harmed, why don't you just write a list of 5 people you've never harmed? Seriously. And I'm like, my grandma. He's like, really? So what was the story with your grandma? Well, she lived in Baltimore. I was living in San Francisco. Did she ever come visit? Yeah, she did. Did you used to drive her around because she was old? Yeah, I did. Were you drunk? Oh, yeah. So you drove around with an elderly woman while you were drunk? Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, there's that. How about my unborn children? Yeah, that doesn't count. Literally, I have harmed every single person I've ever met in my life. I used to talk shit and rip off the pizza guy. Like, he's like, oh, dude, that dude's got such a lame-ass job. While I'm, going through the couch to find 50 cents to buy a shitty pizza from Domino's because I drank my rent money. Like, oh, yeah, but I'm casting dispersions on the dude that has a job. Right? I have hurt everyone. Character assassination, polite form of character assassination, restrain the pen and tongue. I talk shit on everybody when their back was turned and kissed their ass when they were facing me because I wanted them to like me. I ripped off everybody I could. I lied and manipulated to everybody I knew how to. And I tried to take advantage of every single human being I ever met in my entire life. From jump. He was right. I literally, until I got sober, had not met anyone in my entire life that I haven't harmed in one way or another. Right? And as I started to do the work, I started to become really more aware of the sophisticated nature in which I had harmed people. And one of the major things, which I'll close with, was really baffling to me until it was revealed. Water, good. So let's to the 12 and 12, because this is where it gets really crazy. So, but before we close, let's say that on page 77, step 9 starts, right? And so it's really a very short part about step 8, right? We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to dramatic self-appraisal in step 4 and Now we got our fellows to repair the damage of our past, right? We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated in our lives out of the effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. And if we haven't the will to make this list, and remember the second half of the step says, willing to make amends to them all. It's not just willingness to make the list. Once I have the list, I have to be willing to really fix all of those things, which means I have to also know what I broke and how I broke it and how I fixed it. So let me move in to the 12 and 12. Again, like I said, favorite book, favorite step. So step 8 starts on page 77, and this is where it gets really good, right? So on page 76 is the 7-step prayer in the big book, and then we move into step 8, which is on page 77 in the 12 and 12. Coincidence? I think not. Totally made that up. All right. So, wait a second. I got this backwards. All right. We talk about this idea of fitting ourselves to be of maximum service, right? Personal relations, page 77. Steps 8 and 9 are concerned with personal relations. First, we take a look backward and try to discover where we have been at fault. Whom have I harmed? Next, we make a vigorous attempt to repair that damage. Also, he's bringing step 9 preemptively, right? And third, having thus cleared away the debris of our past, we consider how, with our newfound knowledge of ourselves, we may develop the best possible relations with every human being we know. Like, that's deep. That's massive. That's a tall order, right? To develop the best possible relationship with every human I know. That includes you. This is a very large order. Very next sentence. Right? We jump down, it says, to degree, talking about this list, he had already done this when taking his moral inventory, but now the time has come. We thought he ought to redouble his efforts to see how many people he has hurt and in what ways. Simple. Every single person I met until I got sober. And quite a few of them that I've met after I got sober. Right? Because until I really become aware of my own defective manifestations of character, my foibles and shortcomings, I still approach people in a negative, manipulative manner. Even though it's far more sophisticated. Right? I still possess to this day the same defects of character that I had the first year I got sober, only now they're vastly, vastly, vastly more subtle. Right? I used to do home invasions, point guns at people, take their money and go to sleep like a baby. Now, if there's $5 somebody left on Starbucks and I'm walking to the bathroom and I have the thought about pocketing it, I'm wrecked for like 2 days. I'm like, I can't believe I put stealing $5. What the? I'm so bad. I like run and grab it and stick it in the tip jar immediately. Like I have a freaking palpitation behind that shit. Right? Still, same defect. I think I'm entitled to some shit that doesn't belong to me because I see it and the motive and the opportunity is there to take it. Right? Same defect. Granted, I've come a long way, but then I kind of beat myself up for having it. So really, the only way to get clean of this is to have those relationships. Because when I have true relationships, I don't feel like I have to steal anything anymore. And all that stuff comes from this idea of neediness, right? Being unwanted. For me, I always felt outside, right? Always. Unwanted. And now I have this capacity, if it's all about personal relationships, I have the capacity to start to actually live in traditions as well. Step 8 for me, really, this idea of starting to understand how I had hurt people and how I was going to fix it, and that I was ready and willing to do so to everyone I had harmed, was really the door that opened for me to start to understand and live in the traditions. And that's when I started working them with my sponsor. We started to do the traditions. Because an effective A step for me was the entree to an effective first tradition. All right? If step 8 is all about personal relationships, and I know from step 4 that my main problem that I had never recognized, the primary fact that we fail to recognize is my total inability to have a relationship with another human, and step 8 is all about relationships. Once I realize that, I can now engage in unity. And what is unity? My ability to sacrifice my childish needs for the betterment of the fellowship so that it can save my life. You understand? This is how this thing flips for me, right? This changed my entire perspective. I always wanted to be a part of and for people to love me, but I went about it ass backwards, and they always rejected me. And once I became willing to see how I had harmed people and really became willing to fix those and felt a sort of guilt and had a desire for a mea culpa, right? I love that word, mea culpa, because it's not I'm sorry, it's culpa, culpability. It's my fault. It's just my bad, my fault, right? I didn't learn that until step 10. It's not when I was sorry, I made an apology. No, when I was wrong, I told you I was wrong. I admitted that shit. I'm wrong. I don't want to be wrong. Help me not be wrong. Because in doing that, I start to develop these relationships. Oh, God. I told you it's my favorite step. Right? If we look on 78, it says, the obstacles, however, to this process are very, very real. The first and most difficult has to do with forgiveness. Because the truth is, I was very shitty to people. But a couple of those people were shitty to me too. Let's be frank. It says it in the 4th step, right? In the big book, right? This person is perhaps spiritually sick like myself. And then the prayer, God, help me not be an asshole. That's kind of what it boils down to, right? You know? My abridged version, you know? Right? To escape looking at the wrongs that I have done to someone else, I'm going to focus on their wrongs to me and others. Remember that the 4th column of the 4th step says, where have I done the things I resent? In column 2, to the person in column 1, and pretty much everyone else I know. Right? The things that I regret, the things that I hate, the character defects that I find the most repugnant in other people are the ones that I possess. Right? And so I cannot, even though I'm prone to easily focus on other people's bad behavior so that I don't have to look at my own, I cannot let that obstacle block me when I make the list, right? This especially true if they have in fact behaved badly at all. Triumphantly, we seize upon this misbehavior as an excuse for minimizing or forgetting our own bad behavior. Right? That is the classic defense mechanism of misplaced anger and deflection. Well, I know, but look at this guy. You know? Yeah, I mean, I drank a little bit, but look, haven't you seen Jerry Springer? I'm not that bad. We need to fetch ourselves up, it says. We really need to tighten the reins because it is usually a fact that our behavior when drinking aggravated the behavior of everybody around us. Understand, here's something else I need to be willing to make amends for. I made everybody else that I first victimized sicker just by proximity to me. Right? You want to make an amends, how about making an amends to somebody, not for outright being shitty to them, but for making them sicker just because by osmosis, because they happen to be standing within a 3-foot radius. Like, that's real. Who in this room drank the same amount the very first day they started drinking than at the end of their drinking run? Nobody? Really? Oh yeah, that's right, because you would have died. You would have had alcohol poisoning. And if you like dry goods, you definitely would have been dead. Because we build a tolerance, right? I build a tolerance to alcohol. I build a tolerance to behavior. I build a tolerance to lying. I build tolerance to my drugs of choice and my behavior. That means the people around me build tolerance too because of me. That means the first time I do something outlandish, you're like, and the second time they're like, and the third time they're like, fuck, it's just Mark. They know. It's like they basically built a tolerance to me being a shithead. Which means I literally made them sick just by standing next to me. Trust me, that's messed up. Like, you gotta clean that up, right? That's a bad thing. I mean, not to invoke another fellowship that was started by Lois, but yeah, like, it's true. We get sick by osmosis, right? We got pretty severe shock when we realized that we were preparing to make a face-to-face correction. Shit, it was hard enough to do a fifth step, right? Like, to tell somebody. This is what I do for my guys with a fifth step, and this is what my sponsor made me do, and it was the weirdest thing, but it changed my life. Before I went and read my first, real solid book, Fifth Step, he made me sit on the edge of my bed and read it out loud to God, to the air, right? Like, it was weird, and now I have my guys do it, too. I have them do two things. I have them read their fifth step to the air and then put their big book on the highest shelf. So they admit it to themselves and God, then they come and they admit it to me, and then when they go home, they open page 75 and they say, taking this book down from the shelf, and they're like, oh, I just did that. It's awesome. It's very weird, but, they read it and they're like, oh, I just did that. So, I don't know, it's some weird thing. All right, so we have to make this face-to-face thing for our actual conduct. And it's hard enough for us to admit to God, to ourselves, as another human being, but now I got to go and tell you, who I, totally did bad stuff to, and I got to be willing to get socked in the throat. That's happened to me. Maybe I'll tell you that story next week when we talk about step 9. A guy punched me in the throat at Cala Foods in San Francisco on Geary Boulevard. And then he cashed the check. It was. I called my sponsor. He goes, hey, serves you right. You're an asshole.
What about those that you have done harm to, that have done harm to you as well?
Well, that's a good question. People that have done harm to you are perhaps spiritually sick, like you. And the whole idea of this step is so that you can gain a modicum of empathy to see others sick like you. Because the truth is, and this is why this step is an entree to the traditions. Because the fourth tradition, right? Very simple. Every group ought to be autonomous, right? That means you can do whatever the fuck you want. In other words, and Bill says it in language of the heart, when he talks about this, every group and every individual in every group has the right to be wrong. And trust me, if people didn't put up with my wrong shit and give me the right to be wrong for 20, 25 years, I'd be dead. I owe my life to the fact that people allowed me to be wrong. Which means that someone harms me, they're wrong too, and I have to give them the same amount of love. Even though it's sort of like aggressive, tough love that was given to me. I have to allow them to be wrong. And the beauty about step 8 is that it leads to step 9. And step 9 leads to a tiny window in between 9 and 10, which I call 9.5, which is not in the book. It is the missing step, the step of forgiveness. Right? The step of forgiveness. Right? Because no matter how much work we do, no matter how much we correct our behaviors, no matter how thorough our fourth and fifth step is, there's always going to be certain lingering resentments that are back burner that we have when we were truly victimized. And everyone has been victimized. But I don't want to remain a victim. Which means that if I can come to the place of forgiveness, it's not for them. It's for me. Right? I'm mad at you. I'm going to go home and whine to my wife about it. First of all, she doesn't want to hear that shit. And secondly, every time I do it, I'm insulting myself with your insult over and over again. And you're 80 miles away laughing your ass off because you win and I lose. And I'm tired of losing. I don't want to do that anymore. I make amends and I give forgiveness, not for you, for me. It's all for me. Because I am still, to this day, a selfish prick. Absolutely. However, I lie, hopefully, on the edge that the Dalai Lama said. There's this great book called The Miracles of the 21st Century, Dalai Lama wrote. I think he wrote it in 2001, probably, because it's the beginning of the 21st century, just a guess. But, so he spends like this entire chapter discussing the fact that altruism doesn't exist, that it's a fantasy, that there's no such thing as selflessness, like there can't be, because humans have a prefrontal cortex and they're self-aware of their own existence and their own actions. So you cannot inherently divorce yourself from your behavior. You can't. I mean, you can get shit-faced drunk and do it, which is why I like to drink to blackout, which is why I started at a party in San Jose on Thursday one night and woke up in Lake Tahoe behind a dumpster at the Calneva Lodge on Monday in the dead of winter with one shoe and a t-shirt and shorts on. No telling. Just saying. And then when I got home, my car keys were on. And my shoe was in my bedroom and the car keys were on my nightstand. I don't even know. Right? And that's why I drank to blackout, because I couldn't forget and I wanted to forget. And I wanted to divorce myself from my actions. But he says you can't, which means that there's no such thing as selflessness, because when you do something that is apparently selfless, you would have to be an idiot or a liar not to admit, at least in part, that you're going to feel good about doing it, and that is partially your motivation for doing it. Right? So what I do is I live in positive selfishness now. Or at least I hope I do, or I try to, where I benefit at your benefit, as opposed to my old modality, which is I benefit at your expense. So part of being willing to make those amends is to still realize and not be delusional that I do things for myself, but I do them for myself as part of the unity-based community, common unity, that we all grow when I sacrifice my petty wants to the betterment of the community, and then in turn I survive because of the community, which is inherently selfish. But it's okay, because I'm not lying to myself about it. So what does it go on to say? Why is this all about relationships? All right, well, now I'm going to tell you. My all-time favorite line. All right? Now I got all confused. All right, what did I talk about? Okay, so, wait a second. I made some notes. Here they are. Nope, here they are. Nope, okay. They're on one. There's only two sides. I got 50-50 chance. All right, so, okay, fine. Oh, hi, Joe. No, I can't play right now. Okay. So, there's this idea he talks about, we cling to the claim that when drinking on 79, we never hurt anybody but ourselves. Our families didn't suffer because we always paid the bills or we seldom drank in public, right? Yeah, they always hurt. I hurt everybody. Listen, I thought nobody knew that I was a drunk, that I was a drug addict. I thought nobody knew. Shit, I was the only one that didn't know. Everybody around me knew. Like, they knew. They're like, they knew. And listen, and I'm not that swift of a cat, right? Like, so they're like, Mark, you drink too much. I'm like, no, I don't. Watch. And how did I prove? Like, by drinking. Like, who fucking does that? Like, what are you talking about? That's like literally retarded. Like, okay, dude, I'm going to prove to you I don't drink too much by drinking. It's my secret magic, right? Like, and then of course I'm depressed, so I drink, which is the depressant, and then I'm lonely, so I do that shit in my room by myself. Because all those things are smart, right? The solution to loneliness is isolation. The solution to depression is ingesting depressants. And the solution to drinking too much is, drinking like a gentleman. Like, that never worked, not once, not ever. Right? So, of course, I hurt everybody because they knew way before me. And I hurt them on top of them just by knowing I hurt them because I allowed their tolerance of their love for me and their standard for me to be diminished. Right? So why is it all about that? Okay, you guys ready? My all-time favorite line in the entire big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, or the 12 and 12, I'm sorry. And this is the one that tells me why I'm an alcoholic. Page 81, step 8, 12 and 12. Middle of the page. You ready? Defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes including our alcoholism. Let's say it again. Defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism. That means I don't have shitty relationships because I'm alcoholic. I am literally alcoholic because I've never been able to have an authentic relationship. Defective relationships with other humans have always been the cause of my problems, including my alcoholism. I am alcoholic because I've never known how to have a real relationship with another human being, which is why Step 8 is all about relationships, right? It's all about relationships, right? Because when I start the process of fixing these broken relationships, understanding my part in breaking them, and being willing to make it right, then I start to learn to develop real relationships, and then the door opens for me to have traditions in my life. And traditions are not rules for the group. They're all about interpersonal spiritual development, right? There's 3 legacies and 3 sides to the triangle: recovery, unity, and service. Recovery is governed by steps, internal spiritual development. Unity is governed by the traditions, interpersonal spiritual development. And service is governed by the 12 concepts and the 6 warranties, transpersonal spiritual development. Charity, how to give without holding a marker. This is what it's all about, right? Those 3 legacies are the things that guide me. I do my darndest to live by those 42 spiritual principles. When before, I didn't live by shit principles. Theft, lying, money, violence. Those were the principles I lived with. And that weird shit like, oh, there's honor amongst thieves. Nonsense, right? You know, snitches get stitches. You don't do this, you don't do that. I applied a group of broken-ass principles from 1% of the population to 99% of the population I try to live in, and then I was surprised when those principles put me back with the 1% of the population. I didn't understand it. I was baffled, right? I developed these relationships because remember, on page 53, the primary fact that I fail to recognize is my total inability to have a relationship. So when I get ready to fix the relationships I've broken and become willing and really hopeful that they can, so I can forgive myself, and then by doing so engage in empathy development, which allows me to forgive others. Right? I've been victimized. This entire room's been victimized. The world is sharp and pokey and cuts you. Everybody gets victimized. It's your choice whether you want to stay a victim. I chose not to stay a victim. Right? Shit happens. Get over it. Let go of it so you can live more happy and more free, right? Perfect timing. That's the British police. They're coming after me. So I have this list because in the long run, what is the greatest harm that I've done? And why does every single person I ever met make it to my list before I got sober? Because the thing that I've done to harm more people than anything in my entire life is when I was driven by shame and living in false persona and being a shady, scandalous, lying sack of shit. What I did to harm everybody I met was I stole from them the opportunity to know me as a child of God. And for that, I need to make amends to everyone I ever met, or at least be willing to. Whether I can or not is a logistical problem. I just got to make the list and be willing. And that's how I do step 8. Thanks for letting me share.
Tall order. Let's thank Mark again for a great step 8. So it is time to pass the basket. We're doing this in accordance with the 7th tradition, stating that every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. And I have asked Molly to come read the promises. After the promises, we're going to circle up to close with the Lord's Prayer, and I just ask that everybody help us out by putting the chairs up against the wall after the Lord's Prayer is done. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm an alcoholic. The AA promises. If we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being fulfilled among us sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
All right, we have a nice way of closing.
Very nice. Super small group tonight. I guess
Coral, you want to take us in?
Why are we here tonight? Our
Father,
Our Father.
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Say it.
keep coming back and stuff like that. I thought I did.
Maybe you did. So why is there no amen after the third step? I forgot.
Because it's not the whole prayer. It's only half the prayer.
The prayers were linked?
Yeah.